Welcome to Puck Talk CS. I'm Chives alongside Steve. Puck Talk CS, now a Rangers podcast. Steve-O, how you feeling after that Calgary win the other night?
Oh my goodness, Chives, that was insane. I cannot describe what was going through my head during that game. First of all, of course, I'm a better. I threw money on the game. I threw money on the Rangers. I'm not big on Calgary like I was last year. I'm not liking what I'm seeing from them. And boy, did that game deliver. I mean, we look like we came out as fresh as ever. I mean, the excitement, the hits. Oh my goodness, Chives. After that, I'm doing great. I'm ready for another game tonight. So let's do it. Let's talk some puck.
So, Steve-O, in retrospect, last week we announced that Puck Talk CS is going full-time Rangers podcast. Doesn't mean no other teams are going to be brought into the fold, but that's the focus, right? And we announced that the first game we get a terrible all-star break, by the way. 10 days without hockey. And it really felt like 10 days without hockey. The all-star game, I was not an active participant, I did not actively watch the all-star break, the games, the skills competition. I've heard not it looked like a disaster. According to Twitter, according to social media, according to reporters, disaster. Aside from that, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I mean, the Rangers had 3 reps. We last week said Zibanejad, totally wrong. It was Shesterkin repping the boy today. Can't believe we missed that one. I mean, the reigning Vezina winner I'd hope would be the All-Star this year. But Steve, any thoughts on the All-Star break? I have none. I didn't really watch it. I was not very interested.
I didn't really watch the events, Chives. I mean, when I was younger, I did watch the events. Now it's just like I did watch a little bit of the All-Star game. It was just I mean, it's just not competitive. Nobody's out there, playing 100%. The goalies, just they're not 100%. It's just really not competitive all around. So, I mean, Panarin did have a really sick pass. I don't know if you caught that,
I
but
saw it online.
oh my goodness, Panarin had a beauty of a pass. But other than that, I mean, there really wasn't anything to talk about.
I think
Same
I'd
same
cop
same thing
myself.
every game.
I'd cop myself a Panarin All-Star jersey though. Holy, those were nice.
Oh my God, his passive to Johnny Hockey was no look insane.
That's your boy
Also,
too.
I think it was cool to see the Chucks play together. I thought that was really neat.
Hmm.
Adam Fox skated alongside Alex Ovechkin and Sidney Crosby. I mean, that's got to be an experience and a half. I mean, who gets to say they played with Alex Ovechkin and Sidney Crosby? The two dynamic players that we grew up watching. So, I mean, that was neat. And other than that, I think the last memorable All-Star game probably had to be John Scott.
Yeah,
That theatrics.
yeah. No, that was insane. That was crazy. The last time there was the fan vote. Now there was a fan vote this year. There were complaints about players that had the highest votes weren't voted in. Alas, we move forward. The more important thing is that hockey is back, and boy, I mean, did the Rangers ever come out of the break on a full roll like this? I could probably count on my hand the games where it felt like the Rangers needed to win. Not necessarily a must win, but a can't lose. Maybe that doesn't exactly define this game, but this felt like a last season. This felt like 2021, 2022, where this had everything. I mean, article just came out today, New York Post. Rangers not expecting to become bullies after Monday's hit parade by Andrew Crane. But this is something that, as adamant Revo supporter, I was disappointed in the fact that they had ridded Revo. They signed him to they signed him to an extra year for his contract extension. And now he's gone. He had that culture of physicality, stand up for yourself. And I think it turned a lot around in the organization, especially after the Tom Wilson incident in the bubble. But Steve-O, talk to me. What'd you think about Trouba's play? I think this is exactly where he steps in. And this is where I think he gets the boys rallied up, because this was a game that it was back and forth. There was scoring going both ways, but I think that the Flames, even Kadri knew, like, clean hit, he was like, I just got to get up, dust it off, and like take it like a big boy. Like the Rangers played tough. I like the way when they play like that. I think that's exactly how it may not be night in, night out, but a game coming out of All-Star break set the tone, right?
Yeah, and gotta give credit to Kadri. He took that like a champ. And
Hmm.
listen, that was a legal hit. That was 100% legal hit. And listen, Truba is a force, and we all know that. In the big moments, and especially maybe not even the big moments, but the big like shifting moments, he's gonna step in like that and make a play. And I say shifting moments because this was pretty big when you take a look at it. Obviously, you had Heedle come out, early. And I mean, Heel's been great this season. I
Yeah.
mean, he's got to be one of my favorite players, but we'll get to him later.
I was going to
Um,
say, we got to get to him in a second, bro. There's a lot to unpack
we
there.
will, we will. But back to Truba, Calgary, I thought this game was fast paced and played really well by both teams. Madrupani was flying around the ice all night long, and Calgary has really responded really well. And taking really the leverage away from the Rangers. Every time the Rangers scored, Calgary came back. And the Rangers took a really bad too many men on the ice minor, which really helped the Flames out. And the Flames capitalized big on the power play from Toffoli. So even every time the Rangers upped, the Flames found a way to come back and tie this game. So I think the Trouba hit really, really helped, to give the Rangers a little bit of a step up. Every time Calgary kept coming up and leveling them out and putting themselves on the same level as the Rangers. And I really think that both teams took a few stupid penalties in this game. But I mean, that Trouba hit really, it awoken the crowd and really awoken the Rangers. And of course, that power play.
Yeah, Mecca was rocking from that. Now, before I think we get to some of the individuals that had the most effect on the game, because I think there's probably four, I would say, for me personally, that I would point to and say like they really brought their game. Just to figure out, throw out a stat from NHL. New York recorded their 13th comeback victory of the season, tied for seventh most in the NHL, and their sixth comeback when trailing in the third period, tied for fifth. So we saw that trend a lot last season where they were down 2-1, down 3-1, and they'd come back. That's starting to be something again here in this season. Now they're sitting at 28, 14, and 8. They're right in the mix in the Metro. Islanders just picked up Bo Horvat, just signed him to an extension. There's a lot of teams that are competing. The Rangers are going to have to play the Hurricanes in 2 games. But before we get to previewing kind of what's coming up, I would say for me, against Calgary, Yaro Halak completely turned his season around. He's become reliable without Shesterkin. I mean, the beginning of the season, it felt like there was a hex on him. Like no matter what the team did or no matter what he did, really, the Rangers would lose. And he's turned it around. Now, Steve-O, what I'll say about Phil Heedle, because I know there's buzz about him all around. He scored some beautiful dazzling goals. I was a proponent in the offseason of signing him and with the anticipation that he can reach the ceiling of the 2C. And I think we're starting to see that a little bit. And I think the Trocheck contract doesn't look bad for Vincent Trocheck and the team when the management decided to sign it. And with the thought that maybe Heedle won't reach that. But boy, I had a feeling in the postseason when Heedle got going, that was his full potential, that wasn't something that we're going to see rarely. And now we're seeing it. He's putting up numbers. He's at a career high. Capo Caco's assist on his goal set his career high. We're starting to see the kids come into form, and Heedle scored 2 beautiful goals. Like we're not talking just like, some cheeky goals or like he got a little bit lucky. He's really put in an amazing effort so far this season. And again, last night, like I think they're going to have to sign him soon. And I think it's because we're seeing centers around the league, which I know you keep up with this stuff as much as I do. Dylan Cousins, 7.1 mil. They're not going to be able to keep him under contract if they have to sign Heedle and Miller in the offseason. So I think that their best is honestly sign him as soon as you can. Get those contract talks going, because if you wait until the offseason post trade deadline, July range, like you're going to have to pay him a bag that I don't think you're going to be able to pay, and you can't lose him. I don't think you can lose him.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think you can lose them as well. I know a lot of players don't like contract talks during the course of the season, but I think
Hmm.
when it comes to Phil Heedle and Keandre Miller, I think those are two players. I don't think that really fit into that category. Now, I do want to go back. You mentioned two players, which I think obviously were key, two huge players in this game. You mentioned Halak. I mean, he's won 6 straight games dating back to December 17th. I mean,
Mm.
he's been, as hot as they come for the Rangers, stepping up when you need to give Shesterkin a night off. And of course, coming out of the All-Star break, he was traveling, he played, you got to give him a break. And of course, you mentioned Phil Heedle. I mean, he's been outstanding of a player. I mean, this ain't a fantasy wire, but if Philip Heedle is available in your league, you got to go grab him because he's raking right now. I mean, it's great. I also want to throw Panarin in there. I think Panarin, again, I've always said this. Panarin is just even though he's not, scoring the overtime game tying goal, if you watch this team, Panarin is a player that makes an impact. He does it with his passing, he does it with his great puck skills. He's the one that generates plays. And of course, he's always getting points, mainly because he's getting assists on the power play, setting up Zibanejad on that goal. I mean, he really is a playmaker on this team. So you were mentioning players that stood out. I had to mention Panarin.
Yeah, Panarin, excuse me. Panarin to me, I think where he frustrates me is his first season, he had 32 goals before the COVID break. So that was in March. He still would have had a probably like full month and then 2 weeks in April, 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks in April before potentially postseason. Now, granted, a lot of things have gotten us to the point we're at with the organization. But I think Panarin frustrates me because of that sometimes, because I think when he was brought in, he had 4 overtime goals for Columbus this season before we brought him in. He was a playoff player. Not to say he wasn't a playoff player last postseason, but there were times, Carolina series, I would say Phil Heedle was far more effective for the Rangers than Panarin was in that from game 1 to game 7. So I do think that does, listen, I'm not complaining by any means, no. But for his goal total right now, I would like to see him shoot more. There was a highlight over the summer. I sent it over to Zaretsky. I was like, it was him weaving his way through the Rangers defense and scoring for Columbus. Like, went through the whole team, put 1 5-hole on Lundqvist, who at the time, one of the top goaltenders in the league. We haven't seen that as much from him, but I do think in the respect as a playmaker, his passing's unreal. So definitely up there. I mean, the pass to Zibanejad, beautiful. Like, there's really a very select handful, I would say, can make that pass at the NHL level. And that's the top of the world. So world-class passer, playmaker. Another player I wanted to mention aside from that, just because it's a pretty cool thing for the franchise as a whole, was Adam Fox. He only had an assist against a team that drafted him in Calgary, but he is the quickest within his first 4 NHL seasons to the most assists in franchise history with 178, beating Leach by 177. He still has the rest of the season to go. So there's another player. And I think Steve-O, because I know this is something that we've talked about before. His name is in the trade rumor mill. And I think it's something that we'll see how things play out in about a month. The trade deadline's March 3rd. The New York Rangers drafted Alexis Lafreniere first overall, got that ping pong ball. So lucky. He came in as potentially that like Austin Matthews level prospect. And I know a lot of people listening right now will disagree, but in hindsight, coming out of the World Juniors, coming out of some of the COVID scheduling issues with the junior leagues, he put up 100+ points with Rimolski when he played in the juniors, and it was no doubt a surefire. I thought he was going to come in and kind of tear it up. And that's obviously not how his career in New York's played out. Gallant consistently says, last season he had 19 goals to 20 goals. And if you listen to post-game pressers, he says, he needs to build confidence. And there's times where when he's been scratched, it's to give him a kick in the butt, and he's responded. I thought the game against Calgary on Monday was the best game we've seen from him all season. And even though the overtime goal really capped it off, I would argue that it was still a step in the right direction from puck drop. Would you agree with that? What are your thoughts on Lafreniere?
Yeah. Trying to think when you mentioned that you thought this was his best game of the season. I'm trying to think of another one. Nothing's coming to my mind right now, but I do definitely agree with you with Lafreniere. He's a really big, talking point. I'm hearing a lot of other people, a lot of Ranger fans that I talk to, he's a really big question mark. And I'm really curious because a lot of people have different opinions on what to do with him, what the path is for him. And I think the Rangers should got to keep going with him. I mean, you mentioned everything, his accomplishments that he's done at the World Juniors and all that. Even though he hasn't blossomed into a McDavid or Matthews type figure, I still think that he is still a valuable piece to this team. He's not going to be the Matthews on the Rangers, but he's still a very, very, very important piece. I like the skills that he brings to the team. I mean, he's just a phenomenal skater all around. And I think, it might be a little too early to answer that question. I think, he's a really big piece to this team, especially in a few weeks when we start talking about the trade deadline and what the Rangers might look to add. I think Lafreniere is a big piece to this team.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to save more of that conversation for a little bit later, because
I
where I'm at
agree.
in my head, my assessment, if I'm going to look at Lafreniere real quick, I think from this game alone, we say that's a great confidence booster. I mean, of all the players that needed a goal, Jacob Trouba said it in his post game. He said, listen, that's huge for him. It's huge for him. If there's one guy in the locker room you wanted to score that overtime goal, it's Lafreniere, especially for the way the season's gone for him, the way the press has approached Lafreniere as a player, what he's contributed to the team. He's another asset on that kid line. For more than one stint up on the first, second line, it just hasn't really worked. But when those three are together, they're fire. So I think it was great to see that he also got that Gallant deployed him in overtime, because it allowed him to get that opportunity and he capitalized. So I think that's where you love to see that. I was very happy that it was Lafreniere. I think it would have been cool if it was Hedel, in those dying seconds, he got robbed. And he was on the ice. It looked like he had a few whacks at and a chance in front of the net, but if there's anyone, it would have been Lafreniere.
That stems us to, we did get a fan question from somebody. Connor asked us a question about Lafreniere. He asked us, Lafreniere struggles this year. Does it have to do more with the coach, or does it have to do with his preferred style of play? It's just not possible in the NHL. I know that we gave our opinions on that. I don't think it has to do with the coach. I just think that, coming out to the earlier in the year, you threw Vinny Trocheck in there. I just think the Rangers were a little sloppy to start the year. And I just think that, listen, players are not always going to not going to be playing 100%. I don't think Lafreniere's chemistry was a little off in the beginning of the year. Hopefully, I think, and you could go to this point last season too, Lafreniere in the second half of the season stepped it up. And he had a better second half of the year last year than he did the first part of the season. So I think maybe that could be the similar case this year. I don't think it has to do with the coach. You look at Panarin's struggles last year, and this year he's kind of doing a little bit better than last year. So, and I'm not going to rule out the possibility that I think I'm not going to say that his style is not going to work in the NHL. I'm not going to say that either. I don't know if you want to chime in there, Chives, and answer that.
Yeah. I have, listen, I'm sitting on a chair right now talking about this on our podcast. So I'm not saying this as critically. I'm saying it more as an observation. I don't think his skating's NHL level. I think his stride is not NHL level. And I think you see it because a lot of times he gets beat to pucks. a lot of his zone entry at the juniors level was he would take it wide and cut in like a power forward, but it was because he had that jump. I think something that scouts said before he was drafted was that skating was not his forte in terms of the explosiveness, like the explosive level of speed that's required. And I think that it's been something that affects his game because of his style. His style, he needs to be able to have that explosive jump in order to score. He was a scorer. And I think what's different is that Kako wasn't fast at the juniors level because his style of play is puck possession. He uses his big frame, cuts to the net. He's not finesse. And I think Lafreniere is more finesse. I don't think he has the stride for the NHL level. Now, I don't have the exact article pulled up. Can't read off of it. Over the summer, Corey Pronman, athletic writer for prospects and scouting. He's their top writer in that like sector. He had written that Lafreniere has, he has pretty good grades for most of his assets, his shot, his vision, but the worst grade was on his skating. And I do think that's true. I think when I watch him play, it's like he has the physicality, but it seems like he's always a stride behind on the forecheck, getting to pucks. I think what's also something I've noticed was in that preseason, we saw him score that goal against the Devils where it was like, whoa, we flew in, made a move and scored. We have yet to see him drive a play on his own. Like, I don't remember the last time I thought like Lafreniere carried the puck into the zone, went in and scored, which is something that he's very young. But when you move Buchnevich, I didn't understand the move, then I did. And it was like, you want Lafreniere and Kako to step into that spot and then become, a first liner or second liner. I just don't think when he's playing against Evgeny Malkin, like if you're thinking about divisional rivals, Svechnikov, like I think they're going to beat you to the puck over Lafreniere. But he's got time to develop and we'll see what happens. That's just my take on his assets as a skater. I just don't think he has the explosiveness.
I see. Respectable. I mean, I have no arguments there on that point. He got the overtime winner, and I think the last point I'll say on this, before we move on, is on the Flames point. I mean, Jonathan Huberdeau and Jacob Markstrom are having terrible, terrible years.
Wow,
I mean,
Steve-O.
watching this game, I mean, just enhanced that. You look at Huberdeau last year, I mean, Calgary is not his fit. We talked about this in the off season. I mean, it's just not a match. Do I dare say it, Chives? I mean, right now, with the Panthers and Matty Tkachuk, I think the Panthers have won this one because Huberdeau is lost as they come. I mean, in this game, non-factor. And also Jacob Markstrom as well. You look at the year last year that he had. I mean, last year was crazy. He had a crazy great year. You look at what he took the Flames. And he was a conversation. I had him in the Vezina conversation. I mean, this year he's just looked terrible. The couple goals he got beat on by Hito. I mean, just not good years for both of them, Chaz.
What's scary is that I didn't realize Huberdeau was skating for the Flames. And I sat down and watched this game. Like, this is not a game that I was like in and out type. This was a game that I watched the pre-show with our boys Gino and Valley and Hank. Hank was fired up after the game. I was hyped. He was like, he pulled out a Gladiator reference. Anyway, did not realize I don't even think they really brought Huberdeau up either. And I'm not saying that that's poor coverage. I'm just saying he's really not that effective right now. And I think I realized that. Yeah. And you saw Tkachuk won MVP, then had a 5-point game against Tampa the next night. So Matt Tkachuk's on a tear. He's the first player since Huberdeau to reach the 70-point mark in his first season with the team. So Matty Tkachuk's doing everything and more. I know he's in the top 15. I don't know where exactly he ranks, but he's in the top 15, maybe 10 in NHL scoring right now. So yeah, Matt Tkachuk's really having that effect for Florida. And the Rangers won't be playing Florida soon, but they will be playing a team, the Vancouver Canucks. And I think the Rangers are in a really good standing right now because they came out of break with one of the best performances of the season. So now you go and you're going to play Vancouver, who are 20, 26, and 4. We just talked about them on our episode. Bruce, there it is. They're kind of collapsing. So I think this is a game that you want to win. You want to get the 2 points to keep pace in the Metro, right, Steve-O?
Yeah, of course, Chives. Also, I mean, you got to take a look at the Canucks played coming out of their All-Star break. I mean, they played the Devils, and quite frankly, they played a really well played game, Chives,
I
against the
agree.
Devils. They lost, but they took them 4-4 into overtime. And when you take a look at it, I did catch a little bit of that game. They didn't play that bad. And I think when you break their season down, I mean, their offense has been efficient sometimes. I mean, we've talked about them before with JT Miller and the gang. They are just, you can't rely on them. They're not reliable. But their offense can be efficient sometimes, and they can give the Rangers some problems. Where the Canucks go wrong is, of course, their defense and their goaltending, two
Yeah.
categories that have struggled mighty, mighty, mighty. So, with us knowing that, I think the Rangers really, 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 really need to jump out fast and really hammer the puck in the Canuck zone, because that's going to hurt their defense. It's going to hurt their goaltending. And this is this team's weakness. They are not a team that can recover fast. I've cut some games, I've talked about ESPN Plus. I watch, at nighttime here and there sometimes. When the Canucks go down at the start, this is not a team that could come back. When you keep it close, like they did with the Devils, they could get something going, and they could beat you there. All it takes is 1-2 goals. They could do that. But when you jump out to that 2-goal lead, the end of the first period, you're up by 2, you're up by 3 early on. That's it for them. Their defense is going to fold. Their goaltending is not that strong. And their offense is really going to have a hard time generating it when they can't get the puck into their own zone. So with us knowing that, that's going to be a big key to tonight's game.
Wow, bro, this week's flying on me. I was like thinking this game's tomorrow. Dude, I'm all over the place. Forgot Huberto was in. Listen, you got to give me that though, Steve-O. Who I did, like, come on.
I'll give you Huberto.
Invisible.
I mean, I forgot too that he was on the ice.
He's the invisible man right now. But man, dude, the one thing I want to bring up, if there's one narrative, it's got to be JT Miller coming into town, man. He has played with a chip on his shoulder. He yelled at his teammates. He yelled at Horvat on the bench. He yelled at Colin Delia for not getting off the ice as the pulled goalie situation. He's been vocal in the media. They signed him over the summer. Former Ranger. And a Ranger that at a time I didn't believe had a shot. Meaning, I don't think Alain Vigneault gave him the opportunities he should have deserved. And now I think what's interesting is it seems like he has the A on his chest, but it seems like the passion sometimes goes a little bit, I wouldn't say too far. Because there's like Michael Jordan level of passion, right? Where it's like he's balling. So when he's got something to say and he's pushing his teammates, it's for the better of the team. JT Miller's just not on a team right now that I think requires that. Like, there's a lot of assets that they have on the team right now that aren't long-term. So, like, if he's going to be a bully in practice and like he just talked today to the province, came up in the news that he's talking about the lore of NYC motivation coming into MSG. Like, I just think there's a lot surrounding him right now coming out of Vancouver. And I mean, their fans are not happy with what's going on. But if there's one player to watch, because we know there's a book. I want to write a book on this. The 100 things that will happen to the New York Rangers. One of them, a former Ranger is going to have a game. It's Steve-O.
You mentioned, you want to talk about former Rangers. How about Philip DiGiuseppe?
He scored the other night.
Yes, he did. And he'll be another former Ranger coming back to the Garden tonight playing against the Rangers. He was obviously he was just called up after being acquired from the Islanders. So he's another player out there to watch. I think this is going to be an interesting one, Chives. I think, again, like I mentioned, this is not a bad Canucks team offensively.
Hmm.
They have pieces. Also not to mention, we'll also see Anthony Beauvillier play, of
Oh,
course, his second game after being uh um acquired from the
Ranger
Islanders.
killer.
Yeah, and he's
He's a
somebody that
freaking
knows the
Ranger
Rangers
killer.
really well, playing them
Yeah.
from when he was with the Islanders all those times within a season. So he'll be playing. He's another player to watch. This is going to be an interesting one, Chives. You have any keys to the game or key players to watch tonight?
Actually, I just had two things to say. One, I always loved Di Giuseppe, man. I thought he was a
Me too.
hustler.
Me
Like,
too. Me too.
I thought he was a player that, like, when we needed those types of depth players, I thought he would stay. So I was disappointed to see him leave because I thought he could have been like a Brodzinski, like a call up or. But listen, I think what he wanted was more NHL time, and I think now he's earned it. He's earning that in Vancouver with a good opportunity. They're rebuilding, so he's going to get the ice time. JT Miller, I think he's a guy to watch. I think that's the number one storyline. Number two, I think that I always kind of flip flop on the kid line and their ages and their contracts and what we should do with them. I think JT Miller's a really good example of, for if you're a supporter of hold on to the kids, I think JT Miller is a great example of that because he started to blossom in his third season with New York, and then the Rangers packaged him in the rebuild. The worst deal out of the rebuild, easily. And I think he's an example that then he goes on and he had a 99-point season last season. So I do think that he is an example of that. And I think we're going to see that in front of our very eyes tonight, that he is that. I mean, we saw he scored the overtime goal against us on the road in Vancouver last year. Heartbreaker. I mean, the Rangers were up 2-0 in that game. They lost their Canadian road trip in, I think it was October or November last season. But coming into this game, another thing to keep an eye on. Last season, the Canucks did come into Madison Square Garden, world's most famous arena, and they won 6-4. And that was right after the Rangers beat the Blues. And that was when Lafreniere was moved up to the first line. And that's where confidence started to build. It was like, oh my gosh, Shesterkin's putting up crazy numbers. And it was during March or late February, March. And the Canucks came into MSG and they won. And they kind of blew the doors off. They were up 4-0 at one point. I think that it's like football, Pete Rozelle would say, any given Sunday. And I think the Canucks do have the assets, but I do think it would come down to the Rangers playing poorly. And tonight they got Shesterkin in net. Halak just backed you up to a huge victory. And I think wins like this propel you. We saw in the Dave Quinn 2019-20 season, the Capitals game, they won that. They didn't lose a game in February that season. And it was because of that game. The game where Igor Shesterkin played his first career game against the Colorado Avalanche, Nate McKinnon broke in and scored like 2 minutes in. And everyone was like, oh boy, here we go. The Rangers won that game 5-3. Earlier this season, the Rangers were down 2-0 against Minnesota. I was at that game. Come back, winning the shootout. But it's those almost like magical games that can propel your team and give you that confidence. Like, yeah, we could do this. We saw it against Carolina. We saw it against Pittsburgh in the postseason. The postseason were full of those types of games where it was like, don't know how they won that, but they're moving forward. And I think the win on Monday is a win like that. Like, I think that can propel them. I think the Canucks have, any team can win on any night. I think it would take the Rangers really like playing poorly, sloppy with the puck, that type. What about you? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I agree with that. I love the point you mentioned because the Rangers do not have a good track record recently against the Canucks.
Mm,
Canucks kind of had their number a little bit, I remember the last few years. But again, tonight, again, I mentioned, it all comes down to those first 10 minutes of the game. If the Rangers are able to come out and not even, come out to a 1-2 goal lead, but if you in Calgary, you knew in the game against Calgary that the Rangers were going to put one in the net because they got the chances. I mean, towards the end of the third period, Calgary was getting no chances. The Rangers were swarming in the zone on that net, and you knew something was going to be well. So again, if the Rangers could take that and carry that into this game, again, We know the Canucks' weakness is that's going to give them a really hard time. And listen, when you take a look at this Rangers team, that is not a tough thing to ask for. And I think the Rangers can do that. Now listen, Chives,
Mm.
what do you got as prediction? Because I was thinking about betting the Rangers tonight. What do you think?
Well, shoot. My buddy took the over the other night, and I was like, you know what? Maybe it'll be a high scoring game, and then it was. Um, I'm not really a sports bettor, but if I'm not actually. The last bet I put down, even though I was the same guy, Bengals fan, never met one before, talked about him before on the podcast. I bet in Odell Beckham Jr. because he's my favorite player ever. I mean, Giants guy, right? Like now Devontae Adams, but growing up, come on, OBJ. And he's the reason I stopped watching was when they traded him, the Giants. So I put down anytime TD OBJ, made my money, and I said that's it. I made like $60 off the anytime TD in the Super Bowl, which he scored first. But if I'm gonna go with a score, man, like I feel like,
or it doesn't have to be a score. It could be a winner.
Oh, it's got to be the Rangers.
You think so?
I think there are games even last season. Like there was a game or two where the Rangers were playing Carolina down the stretch, and I was like, listen, Carolina's going to win this game. And I think we both have the capability, and we're both, I think, neutral enough to know kind of when a team's hot. And I think the Rangers coming off that win, no matter what anyone says, it doesn't matter who. The beauty of a game like last game is that it didn't matter who scored. There's no like, oh man, Zibanejad's on a goal streak, and if he doesn't score, they're gonna lose type. No, like last game, it really was an all-around team effort, and I think that's gonna propel them forward. I'm taking the Rangers.
I'm gonna take the Rangers too.
Yeah.
I like the Rangers again. I think compared to the past teams that Vancouver had when playing against the Rangers and have beat them, this is just a different team. Not with different players, but the mindset of where this team is at.
Yeah.
And the capability that they have, again, it's there. But I think that this will be a close game tonight. I think it will be a close game, but at the end of the night, Igor Shesterkin back in net, bad defense, bad goaltending on the other side. I'm gonna say Rangers tonight. I'm gonna take them tonight.
Now, here's another thing I wanted to talk about kind of before wrapping up, because it's something I've really enjoyed this season. Now, it's something that when it works, it's great. And when it's not working, it's frustrating, because I think Chris Drury loves this like 2003 type, like we got some bruisers, we got some skill guys. Listen, every team needs all that. What I really enjoyed the other night was the passion. And I think that's the difference between a team that, like, I really do see the difference now than when, but in the bubble season. Like, the Rangers were not afraid the other night, and Jacob Trouba threw 2 clean checks, wasn't afraid to fight after. I mean, the first check, Will Coulier, who like just got called up, it already has a career fight under his belt against Vegas, and now he's like involved in another fight. Now, granted, Uyghur kind of had him pinned, but like, love to see that. Love to see like Barclay Goodrow get involved again. Like, he's just on the ice and a presence in that respect too, because we saw with the Blackhawks game, everyone looks at the Trouba helmet throw, right? Which was, I mean, that was another moment, right? Another like turnaround moment for the Rangers they responded to, but Jacob Trouba, he threw 1 hit and a second hit. Second time, Barclay Goodrow also fought another player on the Blackhawks. Like, the Rangers are in that respect. And I think that's something that is going to be good for the team's culture, because I think when Reeves initially was traded, which I'll always disagree with, Sammy Blais should have been the guy that went. If you're going to keep a guy around just to be kind of like a big hitter, why are you not keeping Revo, who was clearly a locker room presence and personality to the media, all the fans love? Anyway, aside from that, that's a story for another time, because I know we want to wrap. I love that, to see that passion. And I think it's something that won't necessarily stop tonight. Like, I don't think it's going to be like, a complete reverse where they're not really checking. Like, I think they're still going to bring the force, maybe not fight or throw big body hits, but man, I haven't seen the Rangers play like that in a little while.
Oh, I think it's great. I love it. I'm excited. I can't wait. It's gonna be a great game. All right, so Chives, before we wrap, I think we gotta talk about it briefly.
Yeah.
Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday coming up. No hockey games. Eagles, Chiefs. Who you rooting for? Who you like?
Bro,
It's gonna be a good one.
nobody. This is the worst Super Bowl ever. This is the worst Super Bowl ever. And I think it's frustrating because last year I felt like as much, I was behind the Bengals 100%. But listen, Rams win. All right. OBJ, like that story. I know he's controversial, but for me, for childhood me, Matt Stafford, love that story. Aaron Donald, love that story. This season, the Raiders' #1 rival and the Giants' #1 rival. Like, there's no one to root for. So I'm not rooting for anyone. Even though I do understand it is #1 offense, #1 defense. Awesome. Like, should be a good football game. Okay. I think if I look at it from that respect, I'll be able to live. I think it's like a day where, this year doesn't require me to give it my full investment. I don't think I'm sitting in front of the TV for 5 hours, like enthralled. Like, I think this is really like I'm watching and maybe I'm doing my notes for Puck Talk and doing my notes for beat reporting and doing some, typing up some stuff for homework or the rest of the week. Like, I don't think this is I'm sitting down like stomachs in a twist, like, oh my God, like Tom Brady can't win another one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree.
Even
I
though I
like
was
the.
rooting for him a Buck season. I
I
was a
was
big
too. Me
Brady,
too.
and when Brady was in Tampa, I was hyped. I was like, let's go. Eat him up.
Me
Because
too.
I'm
Me
a
too.
Mahomes
Respect to the
hater.
GOAT. But I think I don't know. I feel like a lot of Ranger fans are Giant fans. So again, don't want to see the Eagles win, of course. I hate the Eagles. But again, I'm not a bias when it comes to stuff like this. I think the Eagles are the better team when they match up against Kansas City. I think the Eagles are the better team. I'll be rooting for the Chiefs. I think it'll be an interesting game. Hopefully, entertaining, high scoring game. But yeah, that's it. Here, I think for us, the more entertaining game is tonight. Canucks. But that'll wrap us up here. Chives, send us away.
Yeah, actually, I was going to mention right before we do that, the reason I also don't pick anymore, I learned the hard way. 2013-14, I wanted LA to beat Chicago. New York, I wanted in 2015, I thought Montreal was so much better than Tampa. I was like, bring on Tampa. So every time I kind of choose a team to play against, I learned just let it roll, baby. Don't choose your opponent, let them come. So with that, follow us on our social media, Puck Talk CS _podcast. We're coming out with some fire graphics for that. So keep along. We want to continue the conversation on there, really build the Rangers brand here. Subscribe to our website, the email. You punch in your email, you get every episode right to your email every time we release one. And keep along with the podcast on Spotify and Apple Music. On those platforms, it's free. We're right there and available, and you can carry it with you on your mobile device, driving in the car, listening with headphones. I love sending it to everyone on those applications because I know even though it's a split decision between Apple Music and Spotify, everybody's got it.
Bring on Tampa. Wise not to say that anymore. All right. Enjoy tonight's game, and always remember, it's just the luck of the puck.